We are live.
I'd like to welcome everybody to Committee of the Whole Planning Administration. And I'd ask if you are able to stand, please, for the reading of the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who have served our community and who are no longer with us, and in whose memory we must continue to do the work that we're doing. So with that, I could ask everyone to be seated, please. Madam Deputy Clerk, have you taken the roll, or are you going to take the roll?
Yes, the roll has been taken.
Thank you. So members, does anybody have a declaration of pecuniary interest they need to make? I understand, Councillor Carpenter, you have one.
Yes, I have one item 7.1.4. That's a demolition permit for 108 Albion Street, which says I own a property within 3 blocks of that location.
Duly noted. We're dealing with that separately anyways, because there's a delegation. Any other declarations? Seeing none. So before we get into dealing with items that are going to be separated, I just wanted to say that we ended last week's meeting. There was a little bit of, shall we say, intemperate language. And so I apologize to you, Councillor Van Tilburg. I got a little hot under the collar at the end of the meeting. It was a long day. And apologize to you for some maybe unparliamentary language I used dealing with you.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. And actually, it's more than that. You called me Wednesday morning, the day after the meeting, and gave me an apology directly, and very much appreciated that. And I appreciate you bringing that forward tonight. And I wish that I do the same. I feel it's uncomfortable. I always feel like I should stand when I'm apologizing, but we'll do it this way. As we advocate for our wards and our constituents, we can become passionate, and we can say things that are unbecoming and unparliamentary of this chamber and to the viewers. And I did cross that threshold. I think I was warned once prior, and of course, as I was leaving, as was noted. So with that, I wish to apologize for that unparliamentary language to all here and those who have viewed or heard that language or read it in the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg. So now we'll move on to the items that are going to be separated. 7.14 is going to be separated due to Councillor Carpenter's declared conflict, and we also have a delegation. Likewise, 7.1.5, there is a delegation. So does anybody want any other items separated for discussion purposes? Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor. 7.1.6.
Okay. I think that's it. So I believe, Councillor Martin, you have the motion to approve all items for consideration 7.1 and 7.2 that have not been separated. If you please read the resolution and state your second.
Yeah, I move, seconded by Councillor McCurry, that all items for consideration consent 7.1, 7.2, not separated for discussion purposes, be approved.
All right, Madam Deputy Clerk, if you would please read out the title of the items that we're voting on.
Thank you. All those items that are subject to the vote are item 7.1.1, capital budget request for city-owned housing. Item 7.1.2, 2023 city grants program and preliminary recommendations for multi-year budget. 7.1.3, implementation of minor zoning bylaw amendments. And 7.2.1, the minutes from the Committee of the Whole of May.
Yeah, I got it. Back here.
So the separation of items carried unanimously on a recorded vote. All those voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Sless, Martin, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Hunt, McCreary, Caputo, Secoli, and Mayor Davis.
All right, so we'll then deal with, there are no statutory public hearings on tonight's agenda. And we do have several delegations, and prior to hearing the delegations, I'd like to remind those in the meeting that the following rules of decorum as set forth in the city's procedural bylaw apply. No person shall display any sign, banner, or placard in the meeting room other than materials that, in the opinion of the chair, are legitimate audiovisual aids necessary in connection with any presentation to be made to council. All persons present shall use polite and respectful language and shall refrain from the use of any language or the making of any gesture that is disrespectful or offensive. All persons addressing council shall speak only in the subject in debate and shall not speak in any other subject. No person shall applaud participants in debate or engage in a conversation or behavior that may disrupt the proceedings of the meeting. So we have two registered delegates for tonight's meeting. We have Dexter Stewart in respect to 6.1.1. And I believe his agent, George Ziotek. They're present. If they please come forward. So Dexter and George, if you would, you're coming forward in respect to item 7.4 regarding the non-routine demolition control application for 108 Albion Street. You have 10 minutes to present, inclusive of questions. And I'd ask if you please identify yourself and your address, and then you can make your presentation. Just have to push the button there.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Dexter Stewart. I reside at 111 William Street. And the property in question, the item is demolition of 108 Albion Street.
George Ziotek, 10 Humberstone Avenue in Brantford, and I'm representing technically, I suppose, the support mechanisms that Dexter would have to present.
I am requesting from council if I can move forward with a demolition permit for the property 108 Albion Street for the purpose of, it's up on the screen, for the purpose of constructing property at the bottom lower right. It is a semi-attached fourplex, 2 3-bedroom apartments upstairs on either side, and 2 2-bedroom apartments on the lower in each. The top left drawing is the architectural drawings, collaboration between Mr. George Ziotek, the architect, and myself. The purpose for this is twofold. One is I plan on retiring in one of those units. And the other one is that's where my retirement pension is basically going to come from. I've been self-employed for over 20 years. Prior to that, I worked at West Gas Industries and a number of other places. A while back, I realized that there was not going to be not enough money for me to retire income-wise. As I accumulated properties, the intention was to eventually build something that I could reside in, myself and my better half, and have income that would suffice. I looked at the income that I was going to be receiving from Canada Pension. I have it here. I could put it forth for anyone to see. It equates to, at the age of 60, $600 a month. At the age of 65, $1,000 a month. So my purpose is to get this 108 demolished so I can construct this. And like I said, live in one part of it and rent out the other 3. And there's my retirement income. Moving ahead with that, I backed up on a committee, the Heritage Committee, who apparently they have some issues with that demolishing, because I guess there's some historical features in that 108 Albion Street that they'd like to preserve. There was, and there, I just have to go through my notes here. Bear with me for a second. In 2019, there was a meeting held at TB Costain about that. I was made aware of that when a mail was sent to another address, the property that I own, 108 Albion Street, and the person who resided there brought it over to me. That's how I found out about what the Heritage Committee was proposing. So, prior to that, trying to recall. What do I got? Councillor Sullivan, if you don't mind, at the Heritage Committee meeting we were at the last on, I believe, the 29th of May. Do you recall the last thing that you stated at that meeting?
Refresh my memory.
It had to do with, I think as everything was wrapping up, one of the comments that was made was the last thing that you said was the item of the message not being received or the mail going to the wrong address.
So, Mr. Stewart, the way the procedure works is you're here to make a presentation delegation,
Okay,
okay? And in respect to this demolition, so that's what you do. It's not like an question answer session. We can ask questions of you.
okay.
But you make the presentation that you want to make.
The reason I asked that, understood, Mr. Mayor, the reason I asked that is because from the very onset, I've stated that I never received a letter. I guess I could have came in and objected to at a meeting held by the Heritage Committee about having that property 108 put on a register. And I never received that letter, that information. So how can I object to something that I knew nothing about? And I stated that on a number of occasions, but I went through the minutes that Ms. Tara Tran sent me, and I realized a lot of other issues that were raised by the Heritage Committee was on there. That wasn't on there. And I want to just ask because I want to see the council.
Well, you can ask a question kind of in the hypothetical, and a counselor may decide to answer it if they decide to make any comments and we're actually discussing it. But you cannot actually question a member of council as you do your delegation.
Okay.
Okay.
I apologize, Councillor.
But you can ask it in hypothetical.
Sorry?
You can ask it in hypothetical.
Okay. The bottom line, the base on that is, I don't know where the mail, apparently it was sent, I never received it. So on the date that I was, or could have gone into that meeting and object to my property being placed on that register, I had no knowledge of it. So therefore I could not go in. And I guess apparently some other residents went in and they voiced their concerns, their opinion, and their request was granted, so their property was not put on that register. So I am here today and I'm asking, aside from the demolition permit, is that if I had received that, then it would have made no sense for me to not go in and object to it then, instead of doing it now, going through a Heritage Committee meeting, now coming in front of counseling for this, or counselors for this. So sort of at a bit of a loss of which way to go.
If I understand what you're saying you didn't receive notice, so you couldn't pose it.
That is correct.
All right, so that's what you need to do. Then you state that and you stated it to us. I think we understand that that's what you're telling us.
Okay.
Okay.
Regarding the property from day one, when I acquired it from Ian McLeod. It was an odd way of acquiring it simply because his brother Joel, a good friend of mine, had passed away. From the time I saw Joel till he passed away, it was over a 4-day period. And his brother had to fly in from Tennessee to oversee everything that was going on. So when he asked me about if I was interested in the property, I told him up front, thank you, but unless there's another family member that's interested in it, because I know the property, I've known it since your mother resided in it. Both of the boys lived, one in Tennessee, one in Toronto. So I basically helped care for her and the property. I said, my only intention for that property would be to knock it down. It requires too much work. It's going to put me in debt, which I cannot afford. So eventually he said, I'd like you to have it if you're interested in it. And that's how I ended up acquiring the property. And that was for the sole purpose of it. I met with, when I was tearing down 110 Albion Street, that was my first introduction to the Heritage Committee with, I met a councillor, Dan McCreary, who said, he indicated that, well, through talking, I said, the property's mine, and this is what I plan to do with it. However, if you want the property, just fair market value, buy it from me and I'll go on and do something else. Councillor McCreary indicated to me that the Heritage Committee is not in a position of buying properties. In this year, 2023, sorry, and that was going back, I think, 2014. 2023 of this year, when I called in after the drawings and everything was completed, survey was done, Cahoon Engineering, everyone got involved. When I called to get the demolition permit, that's when I was notified that the property was put on a register. I was a little bit confused. I didn't understand why. I never gave permission, and that's when I was told about the hearing that I did not attend. So, and because I wasn't notified of it, I could not attend. So I said, well, if you want the property, you can take the property. Or not the property, take the building. All I want is the land. But you have to pick up the property and move it to a different location. That, nothing became of that. And I'll even submit it again today to the Heritage Committee. The building itself, I have no interest in. It's land that I have interest in. So I don't know if the Heritage Committee has the capacity to relocate that building or commission someone to do a design or an outlay of it and take the brick and just leave the land to me so I can continue on to do what I need to do. So
you're coming close to 10 minutes. Can you wrap your presentation up in about the next 15, 20 seconds?
I would like council to grant me permission for demolition permits so I can pursue what I wish to do on the properties 110 Albion Street and 108 Albion. And that building on the bottom right is actually on 147 and 149 Albion Street, and that's what it's going to look like precisely.
Good. Yeah, I think you got your message across to us, which I understood. We were listening carefully, but you have hit up to 10 minutes. And so unfortunately, we can't allow questions unless someone moves an extension of that or an amendment of that rule. But I think your message to us is clear. I understood it. And so we will be dealing with this shortly. And so I'd ask if you would step back into the public gallery so we can have the next delegation up here. So you won't have to wait long for this to be dealt with. So the next delegation or the next delegate is Gwen Chapman. She would like to speak to us regarding item 7.1.5, which is proposal re-nuisance outdoor illumination. And Ms. Chapman, if you please come forward. Confirm your name and address, and then you'll have 10 minutes to make your presentation inclusive of questions. Yeah, just push that button till you see the red light.
Oh, hi, I'm Gwen Chapman and I live on Drummond Street in Brantford. I know some of you have seen me here before. I am a member of the Butterfly Way Ranger program. And I've been here because we did the native planting to get the native planting thing passed. So today I'm here about the nuisance outdoor illumination. Planting native plants and trees is a great start to saving the pollinators, but there are many obstacles that the pollinators face besides pesticides and non-native plants. Tonight, I am here to address 7.1.5 nuisance outdoor illumination. We all know that moths and other flying insects are attracted to light. We can see that just by looking at the street lights. However, when a homeowner or factory or business decides that they need to light their property so that the people on the space station can see their building, that becomes a problem. It is not just a problem for pollinators, it's a problem for people, bats, nocturnal animals, predators, and prey. The moon is important to the night ecosystem as the moonlight is used by these animals for a sense of direction. When artificial lighting is introduced, these critters lose their way, can't find food, and end up dying. Larger animals hunt after dark, so they aren't seen by their prey, and the prey rely on the darkness to hide. All this extra lighting is putting both predators and prey at risk. Birds are singing later and starting to sing earlier. The excessive lighting is affecting nesting habitats and habits, and birds are flying into buildings because lights are on at night, and this is decreasing the bird population. Moths pollinate at night. In fact, they do more pollinating at night than the bees do during the day. Disrupting their natural instincts with artificial lights means that plants are not getting pollinated. Non-pollinated plants means no food. For example, blueberry plants are pollinated at night by moths. When was the last time you saw glowworms or fireflies in the city? Generally, you don't. There is too much artificial light, and the firefly lights, which are used to attract mates, aren't bright enough to compete with outdoor lighting. While we enjoy the benefits of well-lit homes, towns, and cities, artificial illumination is exacting an unexpectedly high price from plants, animals, and ecosystems that evolved when days were light, nights were dark, and the age-old cycles of illumination were predictable. The price is set to rise, ecologists warn. Unlike older style orange glowing lamps, which emit light from a narrow part of the spectrum, the brighter LEDs that are fast replacing them emit light across the spectrum with a peak in the blue region. The most wildlife unfriendly peak in the blue region, which is the most unfriendly light of all to the wildlife. An artificial light of unnatural intensity and color is encroaching ever farther into remote wildlands and out over unlit lakes, towns, and cities. Out over lakes, thanks to sky glow. The diffuse pall created upward shining light from towns and cities is scattered by dust, water, and gas molecules in the atmosphere. An estimated 23% of the world's land area is now experiences sky glow. When it comes to people, extreme outdoor lighting is bad for them too. National Geographic states an increased amount of light at night lowers melatonin production, which results in sleep deprivation, fatigue, headaches, stress, anxiety, and other health problems. Recent studies also show a connection between reduced melatonin levels and cancer. If you look into other cities that have enacted light trespass bylaws or light nuisance bylaws, you will find that there are many, including but not limited to Toronto, Mississauga, Vaughan, Caledon, LaSalle, Guelph, Orillia, and Huntsville, to name a few. I read the report from the Let's Chat Brantford survey, and although it appears that excessive lighting doesn't affect many of those that took the survey, perhaps the council could or should directly talk to the people that live beside or close to the space station beacons. I am sure you will get a totally different response. I would be more than happy to provide internet links to more information on this topic if you wish to do your own research. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Gwen, we do have some questions for you. Councillor Van Tilburg.
Hi, Gwen. You might be the first person that contacted me about the lights. I figured that was around 2 years ago. And if I recall correctly, I said Councillor Vanderstilt, past Councillor Vanderstilt, was already onto this file. Are you aware that in the time frame that of just a couple of years ago, when you were initiating your basically concern, that the complaints to the city have tripled? Well, that's what it is. And I would imagine as more people see those lights, would you agree? Because you say space station, but I think what you really mean is incredibly bright daylight at night, right? Would that be correct?
No, I mean space station.
Space station. Well, there we go.
Some of the buildings and houses that I've seen are extremely bright.
They look like space stations. So as more of those pop up, we're going to see more of these things. So you are basically telling us councillors to support this and pass her through, correct?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwen. I've got a question for you. So the bylaw has within it where there is a light that is so bright that it's a nuisance. The requirement is to install some shielding around the light to direct the bright light to only the property owner's property and not adjoining properties. I mean, that's the intent. So you support that provision. That's really the heart of this bylaw amendment, I think.
I do support that. And this really isn't about me, but since you brought it up, it is about me. I live next door to a space station beacon. And my whole south side of my house is lit 24/7. So either by light or by artificial light. I am not going to see the fireflies this year. I have swallowtail caterpillars that are growing a lot slower than they normally would because there is so much light at the side of my house. I walk in my bathroom in the middle of the night and I am blinded by the lights that are on the house next to me. So will shields work? I'm not sure because I haven't seen them working. I don't know. I'm concerned because I see what's happening in my backyard, so I know what's happening out there.
So you're supporting this because you're hoping this technique, if I can call it that, will be a way to contain the light to the person's property who has the light and not neighbors.
Yes, to the person's property who has the lights, whether it be in my situation or at a business or families who live across the street from the lights or live across the street from the companies. There is so much light out there and people are feeling the effect and it is affecting their sleep and it is affecting their livelihood. And it's not fair.
Okay, well, thank you very much,
Thank you.
Gwen. We will be dealing with this second item.
Okay,
So it will be dealt with early in tonight's agenda.
okay, thank you.
All right, so members will now consider the items that were separated for discussion purposes. I believe, Councillor Hunt, you've got the motion to put those items on the floor for consideration.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Carpenter, that all items for consideration, consent items 7.1 and 7.2 separated for discussion purposes be approved.
All right, so we'll then deal with the first item that was subject to a delegate. And also this is the item that Councillor Carpenter has conflict on. And that's starting with item 7.1.4, which is the non-routine demolition control application for 108 Albion Street. And so we have that item now that's on the floor for discussion. Councillor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you, and thank you to the delegation that appeared tonight to speak on behalf of this item. This is the proposed demolition at 108 Albion Street. Now it's next door neighbor, I'm advised by staff, used to be 110 Albion Street. 110 Albion Street, according to our records, was owned by the same property owner. That was demolished in 2014. And it was a building probably of lesser heritage value than this. And I'm glad that the presenter reminded me of the discussion we had at the time, because our discussion at the time revolved around what the committee and what members of council thought was of value with respect to Brantford's heritage. So as the presenter mentioned, he and I did have a discussion, and I think even though he wasn't aware of the Heritage Register, he certainly must have been aware of the heritage value of many of the buildings on Albion Street. And certainly the one that's before us tonight is probably one of the very finest examples on that street. So I can appreciate the desire for the gentleman to enjoy a comfortable retirement. We all want that, and I respect his opinion. But I do believe that this building has value. I believe it has considerable significant value to this community. And I think it has more value than is recognized necessarily by the current owner. what has value on that property for the current owner is the intrinsic value of the property itself, the value to him as a building site. And I would suggest that, council certainly can consider, number one, that certainly the proponent must be aware of the heritage value of the building because of discussions that I had with him previously and certainly seeing what's going on in the municipality. But secondly, the value to him could be recognized by perhaps selling that building to somebody that's going to love it and recognize the value that he would get for the building to invest in another property on which he could recognize his dream and enjoy a comfortable retirement with a good income from property that he would own. So I would respectfully ask council tonight to endorse council staff's recommendation that this building be designated. And perhaps there may be another discussion to be had with the current owner of the property. Clearly, when one looks at the ability of a willing buyer to receive that building on another site, there isn't enough money in this project really to pay for the move. And as we've seen lately, it's a pretty darn expensive proposition when one considers the move, the reparations, and the construction of a foundation to receive it. So I think the proponent's remedy might lie in terms of selling the building to a willing buyer who would love the building, and he could recognize the value that he has in that current building to recognize his dream of building elsewhere. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is an absolutely wonderful looking building. It has a lot of heritage, certainly unique. And I do applaud staff for the work they've done to bring forth this to us this evening. The issue I have is when it comes to heritage is that as much as I don't want to be the one responsible for taking it down, I do believe that the homeowners should have some say in terms of whether they think that their house should be declared heritage or they should have a part of it. I think Mr. Stewart has went ahead and demolished another property and has a plan going forward. And I don't think that we should be standing in his way and for him to do that. The recommendation I want to bring forward is I've seen the plan for the new home that you want to do, which is basically adjacent to it. But I would recommend that you make the fascia of the building look like this building. And if you can restore any of the bricks, anything of that property, that should be able to put on the front of that. That's how I would view this for me to want to be able to give you the ability to do what you need to do. Going to what you're presenting just makes it look like a house that's going in a new neighborhood, and that doesn't fit the neighborhood that it's there. So I wish that my hope tonight is that people on this council will generally look at that in terms of whether or not heritage belongs to the city or to the homeowner, and that you vote in favor of Mr. Dexter tonight. Thanks.
Next, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff. So the delegate has indicated that he did not receive any notice of the meeting that was held to designate the property. So I'm wondering, first of all, when the meeting was held. And if the property was then designated as a heritage property in his absence, does he have any recourse in terms of appealing the designation?
Through the chair to Councillor Hunt. So I would like to clarify that at this time, the property is listed on the Brantford Heritage Register. It's different from a designation. Listing puts it on a list that identifies that it may warrant a heritage designation at a later time when more research is completed. So I just wanted to make that clear that it's being listed. Under the Ontario Heritage Act, the notification requirements for listing a property there are no requirements. It is a courtesy that the owner is notified. And as such, the decision of the project lead, the team at that time was that in November of 2019, a special meeting was held for property owners who were proposed to be listed, were invited to attend this meeting, and a letter was sent regarding that meeting taking place. Subsequently, in June of 2020, as the Heritage Register was about to be approved by council, a subsequent letter was sent to the owners, notifying them that a staff report was coming forward for council to consider approving the list of properties on the Heritage Register. And subsequently in August 2020, council then approved those properties. So a notice was sent out prior to council actually making that decision. To your question about what sort of recourse or appeal process an owner has, they are able to, under the Ontario Heritage Act, advise the clerk that they object to being listed and there is some established criteria what they will say in their objection to demonstrate that. And then council does have the ability to respond to that objection by either withdrawing the property or continuing to list it.
Thank you for that.
All right, Councillor Hunt, that's all right. Next on the speakers list, Councillor Sikoli.
Yes, thank you. And through yourself, Mayor, to staff, we currently have quite a few properties that are designated heritage in the city, correct? And through what process did those homes come to be designated? Was it something that the city decided many, many years ago? Or did the homeowner go through that process?
Through the chair to Councillor Sikoli. So I can't speak personally to how those other properties got designated, but I understand that typically a designation bylaw actually does come through council. And it could either come through council at the request of the owner, which I understand many properties do come forward to be designated by because the owner wants it and requests it. And then other properties are council determined to go forward and then council has that decision. Once again, up until very recently, there was a municipal policy it was a courtesy that owners were consulted and sought to be in agreement to a designation bylaw. But it is more recent that the province has now amended the Ontario Heritage Act, requiring at least the minimum that all property owners are notified whether they are listed, proposed to be listed and or proposed to be designated. That is more recent, but up until that recent change, which was in 2021, it was council who brought forward heritage designations at the request of property owners.
So it would have come at the request. What I'm getting at here is why wasn't this house already designated if it owns the characteristics of a property that should be designated? How does that come to be, I guess? It was really what I was getting at the core of that question. So with the registry list, it doesn't mean that this house will be designated. It just means that's of interest that we're going to be looking at. Am I correct on that?
The clarification there through the chair to the councillor is that the Heritage Register project that then went through all the properties in the city of Brantford to determine which properties may have potential to be designated was a very extensive process. And then ultimately these properties, including 108 Albion Street, were identified on the list. What that meant was that the the heritage experts that the city hired determined this is, this is a property that we think has potential and requires more research. Subsequently, after council approved the heritage register, the next stage was for staff to then actually research that list of properties and determine of that list which ones staff would recommend to council to move forward with an actual designation bylaw.
Okay, that's it for now. Thank you.
Councillor Samwell.
So I just wanted to make sure that we're considering tonight that the Heritage Committee does want to see this property designated. There's a lot of characteristics and a lot of significant value to this specific property that I don't think we've seen in a lot of other properties. Although I understand that we don't want to maybe designate things against the will of the property owners. Sometimes we have to make sure that we're doing what's right for heritage as well. And I also just wanted to say, regardless of how this turns out tonight, that I hope that you take the time to do something special with those historical pieces if it goes the way that you're hoping. Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. We had some properties that were put on the list recently and the owners came and wanted them taken off the list. And at that time, we were told that being on the list doesn't put any restrictions on the property. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, that's correct. It would not, being on the list would not put restrictions on the property. It would only provide interim protection from an application to demolish and provide council 60 days to consider whether or not to proceed with demolition or to proceed with a heritage designation bylaw.
So it's not until it's fully designated that there are restrictions on what they can and cannot do with the property. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Tara, do we not have zones that are that require to come before council for certain homes under that require demolition?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Tilburg, there is a demolition control area bylaw, which is intended to protect housing stock in general. And this property falls in that demolition control area bylaw.
So that would be coming before us regardless because of that.
Through the chair, in fact, this report is that.
This report is that. So this is not actually that portion of it, the demolition is not out of the ordinary for what I've seen in the past in Eastward and older areas there.
Through the chair, if I'm understanding your question, this the demolition control bylaw asks if housing stock is to be demolished, and the question to answer is yes or no. But then the demolition control bylaw also asks if this property is on a heritage register, then it requires council approval to proceed with the demolition request.
But they both would have to come before council, would they not?
Can you clarify what do you mean by both?
The demolition, if it's in an area. Oh. Nicole's behind you there. Go ahead, Nicole. I'm just thinking of a property on East Ave that wasn't heritage registered, but it did go through this process that we're debating tonight.
Sure. So hopefully I can provide some clarification. It's Nicole Wilmot, Director of Planning and Development Services. So through the chair to the councillor, not all demolition applications come before council. Staff do have delegated authority to approve demolition applications that are in conjunction with applications to replace that housing stock. So whereas we have applications before us where they are going through a process and likely at the approval stage with site plan control, then staff have the ability, because because it's essentially the idea that housing stock is essentially being replaced. What makes this non-routine and the reason why it is before council is that trigger is in effect is when something is on the heritage register. Because again, so it's that two piece that we cannot actually issue a demolition control permit because it is a listed property on the register. So it requires council to make a decision on that first, and then we can go ahead and issue a demolition permit depending on council's decision.
Okay, thank you very much. And I wish to know what, when the owner of the property was notified, and did it go to the proper address of the owner? Just, that would be, it has to be listed somewhere.
Through the chair to Councilor Van Tilburg, I have evidence that the mailing address was the owner's home address.
Very good. You have to check your mail.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to either Tara or Nicole, if council turned down the request for a demolition permit this evening, that doesn't mean that the person cannot wait a time period and then receive a demolition permit. Is my thinking correct?
So I'm going to ask you to repeat your question, please, for me.
Yes. If council turns down the request to issue the demolition permit, can the owner of the property not wait, I believe 60 days or 90 days, a given period of time, a defined period, and at that point come in and the city is obligated to issue a demolition permit? Is that not the case?
Through the chair to Councillor Sluss. So we are approaching the 60-day limit. So at this point, if the demolition, the 60-day limit applies to council needing to make a decision within 60 days of time from when this permit request was made. 60 days is actually June 28th. So council is approaching the 60-day limit. If to your question, if council does not approve the demolition permit, the applicant is able to appeal that decision and it goes to the Ontario Land Tribunal.
Do we have any experience in how they handle that?
Through the chair, I do not have experience on that.
Okay. So if I understand your question or your answer to my question correctly, if the permit is denied, after the 60-day period is up, if council has not made a decision, the owner of the property can come in and get a demolition permit. If council says no during that 60-day period, then where does the property owner stand? Does he have to then go to the Ontario Land Tribunal, or is that his next step? Or is there a time period after the 60 days where he can then come in and get a demolition permit?
Through the chair, within the 60 days, council must make a decision on this demolition permit and also proceed with the designation bylaw to fully protect this building. If they deny the permit, the owner has the ability to appeal the decision at the Ontario Land Tribunal. Someone might want to correct me, but if no decision is made tonight, or if a decision is made to deny the permit, but no designation bylaw is actually put in place, there really is, the homeowner may be able to reapply for a demolition permit.
I think you turned around, you were looking at Nicole. So we just have confirmation of that, please.
Alan Waterfield, Manager of Long Range Planning, through the mayor to the committee. If council wishes to proceed with designating this property, then we would issue the notice of intent to designate. And that is what the owner would be appealing to the OLT. If council does not want to proceed with designating the property, then you would remove the property from the Ontario or from the from the Municipal Heritage Register. And then the demolition permit could be issued by the city.
So just to paraphrase then, Alan, if we deny the application for a demolition permit, we are automatically opening the course of designation. That's automatic. Correct?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I'd like to ask some questions and follow up to that. So the resolution that's on the floor is a two-part resolution. It's that the non-routine demolition control application be denied. And two, staff be directed to issue a notice of intent to designate for 108 Albion Street. If this was just that the non-routine demolition control application for 108 Albion Street be denied, you still have to then go ahead and issue the demolition permit, do you not?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Right, because the 60 days comes up. So what the legislation says is if it's on the list of not designated properties, but listed heritage properties, it gives council a 60-day window to start the process to designate the property. And that's why you put B in here, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And so tonight, if we vote in favor of this and it's approved by council, are we then designating the property?
That the recommendation is to move ahead and designate the property. It is a notice of intention to designate, which then establish another period of time in which the owner may appeal that notice of intention to designate.
All right, but that doesn't actually designate the property, does it? It just starts the process to designate.
That is correct, Mayor Davis. It just initiates the process. The applicant could appeal the notice of intent to designate, and council could withdraw that notice prior to the property actually being designated. We would need to come back later after issuing the notice of intent to designate with the actual bylaw that would designate.
And so what would be involved in the process of moving forward from here this month to actually designate the property, assuming this were approved by council? What's that process? How long does it take? What does it involve?
That would involve, again, first issuing the notice of intent to designate. That would be sent to the property owner. He would have an opportunity to appeal that within 30 days. And during that time, staff would begin preparing the statement of cultural heritage interests for the property that would be included in the bylaw that would actually designate the property, and we would bring back to council for approval.
So the actual designation would then occur several months later when you pass the bylaw?
Yes, but once the notice of intent is issued, then we wouldn't have the authority to issue the demolition permit. So until
I get that.
until
So
it's either
is there a
designated.
hearing process as part of from when you're moving beyond the notice of intent to designate, does it then move into a hearing process, or does it just move into just bylaw?
We would bring that bylaw back to committee and council for approval.
All right, so I think I understand it now. Any other first-time questioners? I asked for first time, Councilor McCrory. Anyone else first time? No, so we're into second time. So Councilor McCrory.
Mayor, thank you. Having heard all the questions and answers tonight, I want to thank staff for the diligence on this file and also the Brantford Heritage Committee. So tonight is a big step in terms of the process. I would urge members of the committee tonight to vote in favor of this resolution before us, to deny the permit and to issue the notice of intention to designate. The notice of intention gives the building the protection during the period in which we may come to a designation bylaw that would come before us for a later vote. This also might allow something in the way of further discussion with the building owner. And in any event, those who are, I'm looking at the two of you who are opposed on ideological grounds to heritage designations. To support this tonight, you'll have plenty of opportunity later to oppose it if you still feel that way. having heard the logic in pursuing this over the course of the bylaw to designate, the bylaw will be quite descriptive of the heritage attributes of the building. We'll give you the reasons to designate, and hopefully that in itself will be convincing of folks who might not otherwise support this to really support what might perhaps be the first designation in some time. Would staff happen to know the date of the last one?
Through the chair, I don't know.
I should have prepared you to answer that question, but it just came into my head.
No, through the chair to the counselor, I don't have a date, but you're absolutely right that this would be the first one in quite some time. I believe that this would be the second designation that would be before council since council passed the new heritage register.
Yeah, thank you. So, this is done elsewhere. It's been done here before. And I want to congratulate the members of this council who have been on the prior council, which quite heartily endorsed protection, conservation, and celebration of Brantford's heritage, of which this little cottage is a nice piece. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Hunt.
And again, through you to staff. So at this point, if this passes today, is the window closed for the property owner to appeal to the clerk the listing of the property?
Through the chair to Councillor Hunt, I'm not aware of any deadline for the property owner to state their objections to being listed. I believe they can object at any time.
Okay, so the property owner does have right now recourse based on the fact that it's listed, not designated yet.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor McCurry was looking at me when he made his comment earlier. I opposed designating against the wishes of the owner. And it's quite clear from the presentation, the owner does not wish this property designated. He wants to tear it down and put up something else. And to say that we should deny the demolition because we're losing housing stock, we're actually getting more housing stock if we allow this demolition because of what he's going to replace it with. If there is such a desire to see heritage protected, why aren't heritage lovers buying up properties like this, designating them and then reselling them and then using the money to buy the next one? I mean, if you truly believe in heritage, that's something you should be considering. But to tell someone that he can't do what he planned to do with his property that he owns just goes against everything I believe. It's his property. I believe he has the right to do within reason what he wants to do with it. And what he's proposing is not illegal. It's not immoral. It's just he wants to take down a heritage building and build something that will house more people. And I'm certainly not going to stand in his way. I don't know how the vote will turn out, but I'll be voting against the staff recommendation, and we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Councillor Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to staff. Nicole, so if I heard correctly, tonight it could get designated, but the owner could literally appeal that decision? That's correct?
So through the chair to the councilor, I think what we heard from Ms. Tran was that really there is no deadline for the owner to express their objection to you formally through the clerk. I do believe, though, that that's been achieved here tonight. I'm not really sure what that process would achieve, particularly in the sense if council moves to issue a notice of intention to designate. There will be an opportunity for that owner. If that is the desire of council, council moves forward with that notice. It's clearly just a notice until the actual designating bylaw comes forward. The owner does have the option to appeal at that time. So I don't technically believe that they would still be appealing the listing. At that point, they'd be appealing council's decision of notice of intention to designate. So it's not an instant designation. There's research on the part of staff, as well as the formal process of bringing forward a bylaw for council's consideration.
So the owner of the property could then take it to the tribunal, Ontario Land Tribunal?
The owner of the property could take it to the tribunal once council, yes, they can essentially appeal the decision of council to designate the property. And that is a process that does happen at the OLT. I don't have the ability to tell you about a ruling on how that would ultimately turn out. Every case is different, but they absolutely are afforded that right.
Now, if that's the case, he could literally take the property, drop a new set of plans and put together a sixplex if he wanted to. And with the housing shortage, chances are pretty good that he'd get that approved. Thank you.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you probably to Nicole. Nicole, in my time on council, I don't remember a time that we designated a property that the owner of the property opposed the designation. Is my memory wrong?
Unfortunately, yes, it is. So through the chair to the councillor, this council moved to designate it, if council recalls, the former train station. I believe the address was 60 Market Street. So that was the THMB rail station. That was a decision of this council to support and move forward with designation where the owner did not agree with moving forward with that designation.
Is that it?
I believe there may be others, but that's the one that comes to mind being most recent as in within the last 2 years. And we're still working with that property owner as the appeal has been held in abeyance.
Okay. And then secondly, we keep saying or I keep hearing that the property owner has the right to appeal if we decide to move forward with nation, that decision can be appealed to the OLT. Can you tell me the cost to initiate an appeal?
Through the chair to the councillor, I don't have the exact number. I believe it's a couple of $100 to move forward or at least to file the appeal. But I don't have the exact number.
Okay, it's not a staggering amount then. Is that, can I take that from what you said?
No, it's not. The preparation of the defense of the appeal is where the costs come in or with the actual hearing itself, but the filing is a nominal cost.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
All right, I haven't spoken about this and I'll set the timer just to make sure I don't go past. All right. Yeah, there, to my knowledge, there's only been one case where we did it. And it was the last council's THMB railway station, which was designated against the owner's consent. Although, if you recall correctly, you remember the owner did not come to that hearing or did not come to the meeting, which caused, I think, some of us to question why we should oppose the designation if the owner wasn't there to argue against it. Certainly, I am philosophically opposed to designating, I'll cut right to the chase, beginning the process to designate properties against the owner's consent. It is in some ways partial expropriation without compensation. It's, in my view, it's a grievous erosion onto ownership rights, and there's already enough of that in our day and age. That said, I'm in favor of designation, but my approach, and I've been advocating for it for the last 4 years, is to advocate by way of the carrot, not the stick. This is the stick you're seeing tonight. This is an owner that has plans to retire. This is part of his retirement plan, his financial retirement plan. And you put him through a process of appealing to the OLT, and he's going to be eating up a lot of his equity in legal fees and planning fees to take this to the OLT. I don't feel good about subjecting him to that process. Getting back to designating properties, as I said, my experience has been that those who best preserve heritage properties are those who love their property, who appreciate and are passionate about history and do that with their property. For someone who is not into that for their property, you're just going to end up with a property that over the course of time, usually it falls into disrepair. And then before you know it, there's a fire or something else like that. And I really believe that if we're expecting property owners or hoping property owners will preserve our history, which I think is a good thing, we should be encouraging them and we should be offering them a grant program, which I've been advocating for, to help them with the costs of taking care of their older properties. And I think it's only fair we do that if they're taking on the role of preserving our heritage, that they should receive some assistance in doing that. But to do it against someone's consent, I am philosophically opposed. I've always been, and I always continue to. Although I will say I will aggressively advocate, as I have, for a different approach, which is the carrot, which is encouraging people, owners who appreciate their heritage, and helping them in the costs of doing that. So, Councillor Van Tilburg, second time.
It's been a hard one to sort in my head. Quite frankly, when we get into building homes faster, heritage takes a back seat. And I think that a lot of the neighborhoods that people are comfortable with and they wonder what happened to my neighborhood. Well, it's going to be things like this that make the change. So, that's the hard part, is people recognizing that your neighborhoods are going to be turned upside down. The other thing that is quite common, and I didn't hear it in this case, and so I'm going to make the assumption it didn't happen. But in many cases, people are being evicted from rentals that they could afford. And the new builds, practically every new build is far out of reach of most people. That is the crisis. It is the people who are saying, my God, what happened to me? I'm being evicted. So, there was this thing that I think is very valuable that was mentioned in the debate tonight. And that is maintaining the housing stock, because there was once a time of practice of I'm going to knock the building down, and then nothing happened and we were short. So we may be getting more homes. We may not get that picture that was shown to us. That's the risk that you take. and get something completely different, bigger, more density. We don't know. But what we will know is that little home that many people cherish to visually look at, it's appealing. It won't be there. And so one might want to wait for all the citizens that own heritage type homes to say, I will put mine on the registry and never do this. Well, you know what? A lot of people that buy homes from out of the province don't really, or out of the city, probably don't really care. They're there buying, and their opportunity is theirs to make money, remove the people that are there, knock the building down, and carry on. I actually didn't hear that this time to that degree. I heard local man, worked at Westcast, things go downhill. The circumstance in which he got the property, it is a nice property. It's got heritage components to it. There's no doubt. There is a part I think I'll save my comments for when the next piece comes, but that's where my head's at right now, listening to the debate so far, and I still haven't made my mind up.
All right, I'm going to call the question then, unless there's anyone else who wants to speak to this that hasn't already spoken to it twice. You've already spoken to it, Councillor McCurry, twice.
Mayor, I was just hoping I could clarify a question that came up.
No, you've already spoken to it twice. So, Councillor Caputo.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I actually have an amendment to this tonight.
You have an amendment. Well, certainly now would be the time, because I think everybody's had their chance to speak.
Okay. So that being said, there we go. So moved by myself, seconded by my board mate, that the recommendation of item 714 be struck and replaced with A, that 108 Albion Street be removed from the City of Brantford's Municipal Heritage Register, and that B, that the request to demolish 108 Albion Street be approved because the owner has satisfied the conditions of bylaw 156/2019 in ensuring that existing housing stock will be replaced by new residential units, and the owner has submitted the necessary building permit applications for the proposed redevelopment. And C, that the applicant is encouraged to replicate the heritage architectural features identified in report 2023-413 in the facade of the new structure where possible.
Okay.
Mayor, I'm
discuss-
going to raise a point of order.
Yes, raise your point of order, please, Councilor.
The amendment is completely contrary to the resolution. And let me suggest that if the councillor wishes to introduce something of a contrary nature, then the resolution before us should be defeated and that portion that the councillor has offered can be offered in its place.
Okay. I will respond to your point of order by stating that Robert's Rules of Order, page 123, section 12, says in respect to legitimate amendments, and it says at section 12.8, 3, sub B, that it can include, an amendment can include a resolution to substitute that is in effect to strike out a paragraph or the entire text of a resolution of a main motion and insert another in its place. Yes, there is a procedure that says you should not be amending the basic intent of a resolution, but that's where you're not striking and replacing, but you're trying to amend, leaving in place the resolution, just simply trying to amend the wording. And in doing so, you're changing the intent of the resolution. I think that's what that part of Robert's Rules of Order states. So that's my ruling.
Could you restate that succinctly?
I do not accept, I'm rejecting your point of order on the basis that this resolution is permitted by Robert's Rules of Order. There you have it. So we'll continue then. Anyone else want to debate the amendment that I've ruled is?
Who was the seconder?
Seconder was Councillor Sikoli. So I've ruled the amendments in order.
Seconder was Councillor Sluss.
Oh, pardon me, Councillor Sluss. Sorry, I misheard that. Any other debate regarding the amendment? Seeing none? Let's call the vote on the amendment.
So, that item carried on a recorded vote of 7-3. All those councillors voting in favor are councillors Sless, Martin, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Caputo, Sikoli, and Mayor Davis. Those vote are opposed, Councillor Sullivan, McCrary, and Samwell.
All right, so we have the resolution as amended by being struck and replaced. Any further debate? Councillor Van Tilburg.
Clause C says that the applicant be encouraged to replicate the heritage architect features as identified. That would probably be very much appreciated if that could be done in any way. And so this from me to the applicant is encouragement that you consider that brickwork that you've got. I used to be a bricklayer. And hopefully that you can create a facade using some of the materials there. And I don't know if the councillors have had a brief discussion with this with you before, or if they just thought of it because it's a good idea, because it's not a bad idea. And of course, all we can do is encourage. We can't actually make you do anything, but I would love to give you that encouragement because I do not normally support knocking down heritage buildings.
Okay, any further discussion on the resolution as amended? Seeing none. Madam Deputy Clerk, please take the vote.
Thank you. Item 7.1.4 as amended, carried on a recorded vote of 7-3. All those councillors voting in favor are councillors Sless, Martin, Van Tilburg, Hunt, Caputo, Sikoli, and Mayor Davis. Those opposed, councillors Sullivan, Samwell, and McCrary.
All right, so we'll move on to the next item, which is 7.1.5, which is the nuisance outdoor illumination, which was separated because we did have a delegation, Gwen Chapman. So that's now before us. It's on the floor. Discussion. Councillor Carpenter, then Councillor McCreary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to our Dave Werdick. Thank you for doing this, Dave. I know it was a lot of work. Ms. Werdick, we get a lot of complaints. I've had several complaints, so was my ward mate, about light being illuminated into someone's bedroom. In fact, they couldn't sleep most nights because the light was shining directly into their bedroom. Of course, the neighbor said, well, that's just to keep burglars away, but that light could have been redirected. And when bylaw attended and asked them to redirect it, they did redirect it. And then as soon as bylaw left, they redirected it back again. So becoming a nuisance neighbor. So having a bylaw that could have some teeth to it, actually enforcement to it, I'm support 100%. And welcome, Dave. This is a really good first step for a lot of things I know you're going to bring forward. So thank you.
Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, I'd like to introduce an amendment that's completely contrary to what's before us. Just kidding. I echo Councillor Carpenter's sentiment that Mr. Weidrich is doing a pretty good job for us here. And I believe this came about as a result of some complaints that were received in the third ward. One most notably from a family that lived on Coachwood, who could read the newspaper at night after dark in their abode because of the light that was spilling from not a next door property, but a property way across the road. And for that citizen and for other citizens, the frustration level was extreme because we didn't really have the tools with which to deal with offenders to common sense as related to illumination. So this is a good step for us. And I'm pretty sure we'll be providing you with some more work pretty soon, Mr. Weidrich, from folks that are tuning in tonight that have had to put up with illumination for some time. So prepare yourself, sir.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
Besides the annoyance that these lights can cause, something that I certainly wasn't educated on myself was the effect that it has on critters and creatures in the environment. I really didn't, I just knew it was bugging the crap out of me. So, you know, of course it would bug the creatures at the same time. And so what I wish to know is, how do we go about on educating people and then enforcement? Because obviously we want to educate people and to do the right things and, you know, don't annoy your neighbor and things like that. And then what these lights can do. And then, you know, how you do the enforcement, because this is going to happen in the evenings and the night.
Through the chair, Dave Weidrich, Director of Bylaw and Security. Starting in July, our afternoon shift will be working till 2 a.m. So we do have officers that can look after it at that time. That is part of the report, was that we do a communication part as well to get out to the public. I'm very much aware of the effect it has on moths and other creatures of the night. I've been studying this for about 4 years, and unfortunately, property standards doesn't cover it. The Building Act doesn't cover it. Zoning may, because there is something in the Planning Act that we can do lighting research. So even if we do something, it's going to be grandfathered. So all your big car lots and things like that, we can't go back now and tell them to stop. But again, that's up to council if they want to proceed with something like this for all new developments. It's going to be under planning, zoning, which really has what we have now, no teeth. We just go and tell people you're breaking the zoning law and they continue. And this, at least what we're trying to get in tonight, is to stop this from happening. And I get a lot of phone calls from the people that are affected by this. And a lot of people, you're right, a lot of people are waiting for this.
Thank you.
Councillor Samuel.
right after he took most of my comments. So first, I just wanted to thank Gwen because I didn't know a lot of the things that she spoke about tonight, including blueberries and moths and all those things. And kudos as well to Dave as well. This is a fantastic report. I'm really glad to see that we're taking this step. I know that for many people, the lights that they have around their home are very important for community safety, but I think that this strikes the right balance because in some circumstances, they are invading or intruding on other people's properties as well. And I think that we should all have that choice. So I just want to say that I'm really looking forward to seeing the education piece of this and also proceeding with this tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Martin. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the last item, I said that a homeowner has the right to do what they want with their home, as long as it's not causing problems for other people. And this is a situation where someone putting up these lights creates a huge problem for their neighbors. If you can sit in your house and read the newspaper with no lights on, there's obviously a problem there. And Councillor McCurry's right, we've had a lot of complaints about this. And if anybody thinks this is overkill, just keep in mind that when you start getting complaints about it, if you don't pass this, there's very little that bylaw can do. We need to put this tool in the toolbox so that they can deal with these issues. And without this, that's why what's been so frustrating is we haven't been able to do anything about some of these light situations. You can go and ask the owner to adjust the lights, but as we heard, as soon as they leave, they just adjust them back. So this way they can follow up with charges if they adjust them back and put some teeth into this so that bylaw can do the job we want them to do, to make our city more friendly and safer and have good neighbors because you're not harming them with your overly bright lights. And we certainly don't need any beacons for the space station. I mean, if they can see it from the space station, obviously it's way too bright. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. And through you to staff, Dave. So great work on the report. And I'm going to say from a residential perspective, yes, we have fielded a number of calls. Where I'm concerned is that we also have an issue where businesses are lighting properties that are not occupied at night, and we're encouraging them to light those properties because of security and encampments that are setting up on their property and that kind of thing. So I'm wondering where the line is in the bylaw.
Through the chair to Councillor Hunt, that would be complaints. So if they're lighting someone that is there illegally, I guess, yeah, that you're right. It is a fine line, and we'll have to decide which takes the betterment. So under CPTED, the crime prevention through environmental design, lighting is one of the main tools. And so I didn't want to get rid of it entirely, but again, the shields can be put on, and it's been tried in other cities. There was a resident in the East Ward that actually did this, and the neighbors, it worked. The shields did work. So if it was working with the business owner lighting up neighboring properties, but the people were there trespassing illegally, yeah, that would be a vexatious complaint. I wouldn't take that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't have businesses that are being faced with a bylaw or a property standards notice when what they're trying to do is prevent things from happening on their property when they're not occupied. And we're talking about businesses that are not occupied 24/7. So this is a deterrent. Lighting is a deterrent for some of the unwanted activities that are happening on these business properties.
Councillor Scully.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, I've received quite a few complaints from residents who are experiencing illumination from a commercial business, but through the way of headlights. So cars will park and idle, and the headlights project directly onto the back of their house all night long. And you probably know what I'm referring to here. Does this bylaw, I know the report specifically zeroes in on private property, but is there anything in here that I can use as a tool or that we can use as a tool when we're assisting residents who are experiencing this?
Through the chair, no, unfortunately, we went property standard, so this is to do with businesses and residents, but no, the other, yeah, that's, again, it's just enforcement, going and educating and asking them to turn off their lights because they're bothering people.
Yeah. I'll leave that in your capable hands then. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing other speakers. Councillor Celeste, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, yes, I'm totally supportive of this, but I have one concern and through you, Mr. Mayor, to Dave. Dave, how do we establish a set of standards? Like, at what point do we say, okay, that's just under the brightness that we allow, but that one is just over the brightness that we allow? How do we define that and set that standard?
Through the chair, there was no real standard of brightness. I declared it as glare. So if the glare is trespassing onto the neighboring properties, that's where the shields have to go up and stop the glare. The zoning bylaw actually states the lights have to point down, okay? But it's the glare that's actually affecting everyone with these LED lights. So putting these shields on, which pretty much squares it off onto the property. So if the bylaw officers go onto the neighboring property and they're still being blinded, it's not shielded properly. And then that's where they now have the teeth to go back and readjust it again.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, I'll call the vote. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Item 7.1.5 nuisance outdoor illumination carried unanimously. All those councillors voting in favor: Councillor Sullivan, Celeste, Martin, Carpenter, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Hunt, McCreary, Caputo, Sokoli, and Mayor Davis.
Okay, we have one item left to discuss tonight. It's item 7.1.6 proclamation and flag raising policy amendment. Councillor Sullivan, you asked for this to be separated.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I asked it to be separated to have an amendment installed. Obviously moved by me, seconded by my ward mate, Councillor
Well,
Sokoli.
hang on. Before the standard practice is that people can comment on the resolution before we take an amendment. So. Okay, I'll talk about it. I just did, for the benefit of the viewer, what this is about is, and it's actually very good news, especially if you value heritage, especially this beautiful heritage building, which by sometime in July will be lit at night with LED lights that can be changed colors and will bathe the building in light at night, and will be a thing of beauty in our downtown. But also by probably about mid-July, the bell, which is above the clock, will have been repositioned and connected to the clock mechanism and can be sound chimed. And also there are 4 speakers that are in and around the bell that are like stadium style speakers, and they can actually broadcast music. So because of that, we're already receiving at City Hall requests. For example, Lori, we wanted the bell, if it had been in place, the bells rung for invocation. Potentially bells might be rung on Canada Day. They could be rung on Christmas Day, maybe perhaps Remembrance Day. Those are examples. And also I've been getting requests. I've had 2 in respect to lighting the building to celebrate a week, kind of in association with the flag raising. Haven't had any requests. Oh yes, in respect to the speakers, actually, if you were downtown during Christmas, you would have heard Christmas music that was being broadcast through the speakers. They've just been installed at the request of the BIA. So we're getting occasionally these requests. So the idea behind this is requests for the lighting of City Hall would be in conjunction with an application being made for flag raising. And so the proclamation, if they're asking for the building to be lighted, would be included in the proclamation for the flag raising. It's a little bit harder to deal with the issue of the speakers and the bell because we really don't know what kind of applications we'll get or when, and probably unlikely they would be coming to us in relation to an application for a flag raising proclamation. So part of this is kind of a holding period. It allows discretion on the part of the mayor's office to make those decisions in accordance with the policy we have and the criteria set out there. And then we can review it again in a year or two once we've seen what actually comes in. So that's the reason for this. It's to amend our flag raising policy to provide a procedure and process for requests for the bell ringing, music on the speakers, and lighting of the building. Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, you jogged my memory, Mr. Mayor. Good comments. The one thing I'd like to add is that could we at least look at the flag raising protocol for the Canadian flag? Could we look at protocol procedures for the Canadian flag? As I understand it, the Canadian flag is always supposed to be the highest flag raised on, and another flag should not be equal to it. And there is a procedure or a protocol for flying the Canadian flag and other flags. So if we could incorporate that into our policy some way by just following the federal procedure for protocols for flag raising. Thank you.
All right. So any other, Councillor Hunt?
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. So we're not actually voting on the bell ringing today because I believe today I just got an email from Let's Talk Brantford requesting input on the bell ringing. And I certainly don't want us to appear that we're making a decision before getting feedback on that particular community consultation.
Mr. Hutchins, can you respond to that?
We are only dealing with the flag raising, the lighting today. The bell ringing is for Let's Talk Brantford. I know Maria's just popped up and she'll speak to that too. Maria?
Thanks, Brian. Through the mayor to Councillor Hunt. You're correct, Councillor. We just launched that campaign on Monday and it will run until the end of June. And we're already receiving quite a robust response. We have nearly 200 people who've completed the survey in just 24 hours. So I think there's a lot of interest in the campaign, and certainly we will take all of that feedback into consideration before we adopt a schedule for when the bell will ring.
Thank you, Maria. And that, I guess, was my concern. So we're not actually voting on the bell ringing today. Thank you.
No, I should clarify. There's two issues of the bell. One is, how do you sound it on the hour, the half hour? Is it just between certain hours of the day, certain days of the week? That's the Let's Talk Brantford survey. What this is talking about is, special requests for bell ringing in association with some event or proclamation. So they're actually two different things. So go to Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you for your adherence to practice and policy. It's much appreciated. Thank you very much. Councillor Carpenter raises a good point. We do touch on some of the Canadian flag materials in here, but the Canadian flag is supposed to be displayed in the most prominent location. Are all of the flag poles the same height? I think they were $7,500 each, if I recall. Was one more expensive because it's perhaps a foot taller?
Any staff person able to answer that?
Perhaps staff could make a note and just let us have the
Harmony Square, if I can, if the Harmony Square ones are the same height, Mr. Mayor. I can't speak to the other ones around the city, like at the fire halls and things like that. I don't know exactly those ones, but we could get back to you on and do a little survey.
That'd be super. Thank you very much.
Councillor Sluss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to confirm, I think I read in the background material that you have discretion with certain things. And what I'm thinking of is like when the Olympics are on, can we light the building in red? Or if, God forbid, the Leafs win a Stanley Cup, we could make the building blue. You have discretion, do you not, to initiate that?
Perhaps the clerk can answer that question. He helped draft this.
Through the chair, Chris Gauthier, City Clerk, Director of Clerk Services. So the policy and its amendments tonight relate to community requests. So requests from the community with regards to the changing the lights, to ringing the bell, and to playing music from the speakers. That provides the mayor discretion where members of the community who fall outside of the policy, the mayor may use his discretion to approve requests on a case-by-case basis. With regards to how the corporation as a whole, staff internally use the lights, this policy does not address that.
Do we have a policy that does?
Through the chair, I'm not aware if we do.
Is that something we can do?
Yes.
Do you require direction to do it?
Through the chair, let me touch base with my colleagues, and we could prepare a memo for this committee when it comes to council.
Appreciate that. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Not seeing any other raised hands. So Councillor Sullivan, you've been waiting patiently. You have an amendment, you told us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Once again, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Sicoli, that the following be struck from the not endorsed criteria of the proclamation and flag raising policy, that being religious organizations and religious events and celebrations. We've actually done a couple this year already, so I just figure it's perfect for us actually just to make this in the actual policy that it'd be the discretion. The city's not endorsing it, but it's allowing it on a case-by-case basis. I just think it allows us to be a little more inclusive.
Yeah, so I'll ask a question about that. I mean, that has been in our policy for a reason. And I think the reason was having to do with the Charter of Rights and Supreme Court of Canada. And do we have someone from the legal department that can comment on that, at least so far as what can be commented upon without going in camera, to take a confidential legal opinion? Devin, you're right here. Let's hear from you. Identify yourself, please, for the viewing audience. Press the button.
Oh, through the chair, thank you for your question. Devin Sanchez for legal counsel with the city. I do not have a response prepared, but I can provide counsel with a memo.
Can you get that to us prior to the council meeting in 2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay, great. So any other debate? Yes, Councillor Sicoli.
Yes, obviously I seconded this, so I'm in full support of it. But I do want to just say, you know, Canada was, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm going back to my Laurier days, but we were the first country to enact a multicultural policy and the Multicultural Act. So this is not an endorsement. This is not us favoring any one religion over another. This is simply saying we support you and we're here for you, and we understand that there are more holidays out there other than Christmas and Easter that are worthy of celebration within our community, especially as our community is ever evolving. So full support for this. I'm sure there are a lot of communities that are just going to have a big smile on their face, and they're going to be seen and heard within the corporation of the city of Brantford. And that is absolutely worth voting in favor of this amendment here tonight. So I look forward to getting that memo from you, and I hope that we don't have any hiccups here. Thanks.
I'll just make my second comment. I will predict there will be hiccups, and I take issue that we've had two previous declarations in respect to celebrating religious holiday. We haven't. We had two that were celebrating heritage months that had previously been declared by the province of Ontario, in particular Sikh Heritage Month, and the other was Jewish Heritage Month. And it wasn't celebrating a religion or religious festival or religious holiday. It was in relation to an association, a culture, not a particular religion, although obviously those associations and cultures were based on a religion. That's the way in which they come together, but it was not, those resolutions, when you read the whereas, the actual declarative clause, they were not celebrating religious holiday. And once you have proclamations that are strictly related to a religious holiday or a religious process or procedure, then you're not separating the state from the church, which is what the Supreme Court of Canada decision was about. It was about a situation in Quebec, and I'm sure the memo will describe that to us in detail. Hard to really deal with this without that legal opinion, and as I said, we'll have that before council. So, any other discussion on the amendment? Yes, Councillor Van Tilburg.
I'm looking forward to find out in a couple of weeks.
Okay, so we'll have the vote then on the amendment.
That amendment carried on a recorded vote of 9-2. All those councillors voting in favor are Councillor Sullivan, Sless, Martin, Van Tilburg, Samwell, Hunt, McCreary, Caputo, Sokoli. Those opposed, Councillors Carpenter and Mayor Davis.
All right, so the resolution has been amended. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Madam Deputy Clerk, would you please take the vote?
Not sure where that went. One moment, please. So that item carried on a recorded vote unanimously of 11-0. All those voting in favor were Councillor Samwell, Hunt, Martin, Caputo, Sokoli, Mayor Davis, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor McCreary, Councillor Carpenter, and Councillor Van Tilburg.
All right, so that deals with all the items that were separated for discussion. There are no resolutions on tonight's agenda, no notices of motion. And so the meeting is adjourned. We'll be meeting again in 2 weeks as a council.